Hey everyone, this is Madison Brannigan at Great Outdoors Colorado. We'll get started here to respect everyone's time. I appreciate everyone joining and calling in today. I am a program officer at GOCO and I run our local government grant programs, so our local park outdoor recreation, mini and planning grants. And we have Erica Meyer, who is also going to be calling in, and I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Erica Meyer, and I am also a program officer at GOCO, and I work on our youth initiative grant programs. So our Generation Wild initiative, and then our schoolyard initiative grant program, which we'll be talking about today.
I am going to mute everyone on the call so that there is no feedback loop. If you see the chat function on the side, you are able to ask questions here, and I will take questions at the end and answer as many as I can. If you have a question that we didn't get to today, our last slide is going to have all of our contact information on there. So feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email with any questions that you might have. As some of you might be aware, we did go through a little bit of a transition at GOCO. So again, I am still your point person for all local government grants. If you are awarded a grant, Matt Brady, who is our grant officer, will be your point person for any administration after the fact. So any grant agreements or payments. He unfortunately could not be on the call today, but again, his contact information will be at the end. We are recording this webinar, so if you have a coworker who was unable to attend or you missed something, we will be sending that out afterwards. And feel free to request these slides if you would like to have them for note-taking purposes or things like that. We can send those to you as well. So today I'm going to dive into how GOCO is funded. Our 2019 funding opportunities focused on our local government grants, application process and dates, and then our some resources, tips, and technical assistance while you're writing. GOCO is funded through the Colorado Lottery. We receive up to 50% of net proceeds. The remaining 40% goes to conservation trust funds, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Conservation trust funds are distributed by Department of Local Affairs for the use of acquisition, development, and maintenance of conservation sites, capital improvements, and maintenance for recreational purposes. CTF can be used as match on GOCO grants. The remaining 10% does go to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. The way our funding is distributed is 25% does go to our local government programs, 25% to open space, and the remainder, the 50%, goes to Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We are capped at about $66 million for fiscal year 2019, and that is pretty typical of what we saw last year. We have funded over 5,000 projects across all 64 counties of the state without any tax dollar support. And we are governed by a 17-member independent board who approves all of GOCO's financial plans, grant programs, and all of our grants. So what we're going to discuss today is our local park and outdoor recreation grants, mini, planning, and then Erica will discuss our schoolyard initiative. Our local park and outdoor recreation and mini grants are for capital construction projects for any outdoor recreational amenities. We'll dive more into the funding stipulations on that and what you can request. Our planning grants are for exactly what they sound, for local governments to execute a wide range of planning efforts, including site-specific plans and master plans. Our schoolyard funds outdoor playgrounds and learning environments on school campuses. And again, we'll dive more into eligibility, components, and funding stipulations on all of these programs. So our eligibility, we'll talk about who can apply for GOCO grants, and again, what components are eligible. So who can apply? Entities that can apply directly to GOCO include cities, towns, and counties, Title 32 special districts that do receive those conservation trust funds. If you are unsure if you can apply directly to GOCO's grants, we can help you with that. So if you don't know if you receive CTF, DOLA does keep a list of who they give conservation trust funds to. We can direct you there or help you determine if you can apply directly. If you are ineligible, as in the case of school districts, nonprofits, and unincorporated areas, you can still apply. How that would work is you would enter into a sponsorship scenario. So in this case, the eligible entity would sponsor an application on behalf of that ineligible entity. This can look different for different entities and projects. The eligible entity can be as involved or uninvolved as they would like to be. If the ineligible entity wants to raise funds, spearhead the grant writing, and construct the project, that is okay. So it's dependent on how involved your local government wants to be in that project. The eligible entity would have to pass a resolution stating support for the project, and you would have to submit a draft intergovernmental agreement. We're going to go through these when we go through the attachments on what that resolution and IGA should look like. This IGA will bind the ineligible applicant to the terms of the GOCO grant agreement. And again, we'll dive into that in a bit more detail. Then if you are awarded funds, that eligible entity would have to act as a fiscal agent, meaning we would have to pass funds to the eligible entity, and then the eligible entity would reimburse that ineligible entity. The first step for a school district, nonprofit, or that ineligible entity would be to reach out to your local government to see if they would be willing to sponsor your application. We can provide you with contact information if you do not know who to contact. A question we often get is, can an eligible entity sponsor an application if they're planning to apply also? That is up to the eligible entity, but they can sponsor an application if they are submitting. Keep in mind that if you are applying for the same program, you would be competing with each other. However, that's not to say we wouldn't fund both projects if they are competing. Also, our different programs would not be competing with each other. For example, LPOR are split from our mini are split from planning and schoolyard. They do come from the same pot of funds, but we review them separately with different reviewer groups. So that's one way to kind of go about that sponsorship scenario. Again, if you have questions on that, what a sponsorship would have to provide, that local government, things like that, feel free to reach out and we can help you through that process. So eligible project types. This list is a list of typical projects or components we see each cycle. Keep in mind that this is not an all-inclusive list, and this is for our local park, outdoor recreation, mini, and planning grants. Erica will dive in a little bit more on schoolyard, what those components are, and what she typically sees in that cycle. Things like landscaping, infrastructure, and site prep are all eligible. Typical projects we fund include sports fields, playgrounds, park amenity upgrades, courts, fairgrounds. It is pretty broad on what we fund through our LPOR, mini, and planning grants. Those planning grants, again, master plans, trail plans, site-specific plans. Typical things we fund for those master plans can include hiring an outside consultant, GIS, mapping, things along those lines. We can fund trails within a park as long as they start and stop on the same property. If you have a larger trail in mind, a regional trail, a trail segment, a connector trail, we do have our Connect initiative, which I'll discuss later in the presentation. Also, we can count design and engineering in our construction grants as long as that was completed within 2 years from the award date, and the award date will be March of 2019. For our planning grants, Again, we typically see those parks, trails, and master plans site-specific. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, so please reach out if you have questions on your specific project, what is eligible, or what would be competitive. We can also help with that on what components would be the most competitive in our overall project, what should we come to GOCO for. Some ineligible project types. We cannot fund any indoor facilities except for environmental education and restrooms. Any non-fixed assets such as lawnmowers, shovels, rakes. We cannot fund operations and maintenance costs, any programmatic funding, volunteer time, and amphitheaters. Again, keep in mind this is not all-inclusive, so feel free to reach out if you have questions on that. Another thing to note is that just because a project is eligible does not mean it will be competitive, so reach out to determine that. Some helpful tips to keep in mind. These are reimbursement grants, meaning you will need to accrue some funds before you can get paid. We do offer a progress payment, and we can fund up to 50% of the grant amount with that progress payment. We also have a final payment when the project is complete. We do not ask for checks, just copies of invoices. So in some instances, vendors you work with are also can work on a reimbursement basis. So reaching out to vendors if you have any financial stipulations on that, we can work with you there. Keep in mind that these are matching grants, and we will go over the matching requirements in a little bit. And these are competitive. We fund about 30% of the projects that come in. If you are not successful the first time, you can reapply, and we will provide feedback on and score sheets to you. Speaking of competitive, this is what our previous local government grant cycle looked like. So again, this was our local park, outdoor recreation, our large construction grant, our mini, and our planning. We received 92 applications total for all of these programs. For LPOR, we received 60. We received 12 mini and 20 planning. We awarded 14 LPOR projects, 6 mini, and 10 planning. There were $19 million in requests, and we were able to fund $5 million. So again, we funded about 30% of the projects that came in. Again, keep this in mind when you are applying, that if you are not awarded the first time, you can reapply, and we will help with feedback, and we'll give you those score sheets. So we have for this cycle, $5.75 million to award for LPOR, mini, and planning. That's a little bit more than we had last year, but I do think we'll probably see a similar round as far as competitiveness this year. For schoolyard, we have about $650,000. Again, that's a little bit more than we had last year, but I believe that Erica will see about the same competitive nature for schoolyard as she did last year. So applications are posted on our website now. If you have not looked at those already, we will give you the link to where those are located on our website, and I would recommend downloading those application instructions and taking a look at those questions. LPOR, mini, and planning grants are due November 1. I will be reviewing draft applications, so a narrative and budget, and I will give feedback on those. Those are due by October 18th. Funding decisions for those programs will be made in March of 2019. For schoolyard, again, these are posted online, the applications. They are due January 8th, and drafts are due to Erica by December 11th. Funding decisions for that program, again, will be in March of 2019. We'll dive into our funding parameters and budget. I'll go over the matching requirements and kind of how to fill in that budget form. So for local park and outdoor recreation, you can request up to $350,000. Again, these are our large construction grants. Mini grants are up to $45,000 with a total cost of $60,000 or less. This is the only program where we have a cap on the total project cost. Our planning grants are up to $75,000, and our schoolyard are up to $110,000. $10,000 of that $110,000 can be used for design and engineering. That is not required, but it is available to you if you need it. We do require a 25% match on the total project cost for all of our programs. 10% does have to be cash, and the remaining 15% can be in kind. If something is eligible for GOCO funds, then it is eligible as match, and so on for ineligible. Cash can come from budgets, fundraising dollars, or other grant programs. So if you're applying for a health foundation grant or LPOR, if you're using your conservation trust funds, those all count as cash. We'll dive into what in-kind match will look like here in a minute. A couple of questions we do get about matching funds. Are you penalized for only having the minimum match? So we do not give more or less points for more match. What we're looking for instead is the partnerships you're bringing to the table and how you are leveraging GOCO funds. Are you fundraising with local businesses? Are you applying to multiple grants? If you can bring more match to the table, even better, but you are not penalized for bringing less. We will also look at the size of the community, the financial capabilities of the communities coming in. We also get asked, do you have to have match in hand when you apply? We recommend having most of your matching funds in hand. However, we do not require all of your match to be in hand when you apply. One instance would be, again, if you're applying for a health foundation grant and you won't find out about that until December, but you'll have to apply to GOCO in November. You can put to be determined. You can still submit and apply to GOCO even if you don't have those funds secured. We'll talk about this when we go over the questions, but we do ask for a plan B if you do not have those funds secured, what your plan B would be if those funds do fall through. We do not require letters of support for cash or in-kind contributing partners. However, if you can get those before you apply, even better. Again, if you're experiencing financial hardship, please reach out and we'll do our best to work with you. So in-kind funds are donations or discounts or services that you would have otherwise had to pay for. This includes land donations within 3 years of the award date. Again, that will be March of 2019. Professional services, design and engineering costs within 2 years of the award date. Any donated or discounted materials and equipment from the applicant or partner. For example, if the county is applying for a grant and they are using a bulldozer on site and they have one already, you can use that as in-kind match. We are now allowing staff time to count as match. This is something that we have not done in the past. This does not include administration costs, for example, grant writing, but it does include if you have someone on staff who will be helping with the construction of the project, if they're doing site prep, if they're building the playground, things like that, and you have someone on staff who will be doing that, you can now count that towards in-kind. Again, we do not require providing documentation of in-kind, but it is recommended. So if you are using a county equipment or there's material being donated and you don't have, pay scales for that, rental rates, or the price of those materials, what we typically recommend is that you reach out to rental companies in the area or local companies that would rent the same equipment or sell the same material and get rates from them, and that works for us. Again, we cannot count volunteer hours. Volunteering is important to us, and we ask that in the narrative, especially with youth involvement. However, we cannot count that as in-kind or match in our applications. Next, I'm just going to dive into the budget sheet, and break this down on how to fill this out. You do have to use GOCO's version, which is online. And again, I'll show you at the end where you can find that link. We also have a sample budget online you can use as a guide, which is filled out on what we typically see for budgets. So the top half that you're seeing here is where you're going to fill out your source of funds. This will include how much you're requesting from GOCO, which will go in your GOCO grant request column. Any match that you're bringing will go in, any cash match that you're bringing will go in the top half. Any in-kind match you're bringing will go in that bottom half. Again, this includes any matching funds from your budget, fundraising, and other grantors. Make sure you list these all on separate line items. Keep in mind that the applicant will always be that eligible entity. The partner will always be the ineligible entity, so that school or nonprofit, even if that entity is spearheading the project. And any additional funds you're bringing from partners will be in that partner match column. The bottom half will always be in-kind funds, so any donations and discounts, and do make sure that is a positive number. The date secured will tell us if you have the money in hand or if you are securing that money in the future. So if you do not have that money in hand yet, you can put to be determined or put a future date of when you might think you'll have those funds secured. This is the bottom half of the budget sheet where you'll fill out your use of funds. And again, it is broken up into cash and in-kind. So this is the top half, that cash column. You will organize your budget into categories on the left-hand column. You can make these up as it relates to your specific project and project scope. The number of categories and the types of categories will vary by project. However, try and break these down as much as possible. Examples here include demolition and earthwork, design, utilities, playground. So depending on what your project will be, you might have more or less, and you might have different categories. The reason we ask for this is because we want to make sure that you have done your homework, you've researched costs and vendors, that the budget matches what is in your project scope, and that the budget is not tremendously over or under budget. Once you have these categories, you will put the vendor under each category. If you do not know who the specific vendor will be yet, you can leave that blank or put to be determined. The next column will be your use of funds, and this is where you'll break down each category further and detail the work to be completed. Examples here are excavation, removal of fencing, construction on perimeter trail. It could also be for materials, for example, playground equipment. You'll then determine the number of units. This could be hours worked or the amount of material that will be used, and then the cost per unit will be next to that. Lastly, you'll break down costs into GOCO funds, applicant funds, and partner funds. Do make sure that the numbers are matching what is in the above source of funds column. You do not have to break each line item into the 75-25 split for your matching funds. If you would like all of GOCO funds you are requesting to go towards a playground and $350,000 towards the playground, that's totally fine. We just want to make sure that on the total project cost that you have that 25% match and that GOCO is not paying for more than 75% of the total project. And that bottom half will be in kind, and you'll fill that out exactly like the cash column. Once the budget is complete, make sure the total project costs on the bottom does equal your source of funds at the top. We do have a line item for contingency if needed. Keep in mind that GOCO funds cannot count towards contingency. Calculations are included in the budget. However, just double check those. Make sure that calculations are correct and they're working, especially if you're adding line items or adjusting the budget form in any way. Matching funds are also calculated on the bottom there, but again, just double check to make sure that those are working. Again, I can read draft budgets, so if you have questions on the budget sheet on how to fill this out, feel free to give me a call or send that along to me before October 18th, and I can read that for you. So next I'll dive into application forms and attachments. If you have written a GOCO grant in the past, you were probably familiar with downloading the Word document, which had all your narrative questions on there. We have moved to a fully online portal system. So this online portal system, you'll type your narrative into this portal online. We do have application instructions on our website, which is a Word document, and there is a link to each individual portal on the same website. Keep in mind that LPOR, mini, planning, and schoolyard all have different unique links, so do make sure you're clicking on the correct link. This is the after you log into the portal and get your username and password. The first page you will see is you'll have to enter a project title and an organization name. The project title will be something you can make up, and make sure that it does correlate to your narrative. Once you fill that out, this right here is the second page that you'll see. And this is where you're going to fill out your applicant and partner information. Again, the applicant is always that eligible entity. The top half needs to be filled out with a contact person, a phone, and an email. The bottom half will always be that ineligible entity. If you are not sponsoring an application, you do not need to fill this out. If you're a school, for example, a nonprofit, any ineligible entity, this is where you'll fill out that information. If the ineligible entity is spearheading the project, they will be the primary contact person. And if that's the case, you will check that box down at the bottom. If the applicant or ineligible entity, or if there is no ineligible entity, you do not need to fill out that partner information. Do make sure that you are only listing one primary contact, and this person should be who is most knowledgeable about the grant and the project. Once applications come in, I go through a screening process where I make sure all attachments are submitted, components are eligible, the budget is filled out correctly. So if something is missing or needs to be changed, this primary contact person is the person I will call to get that information. Again, a partner is only that ineligible entity that you're sponsoring, so you do not need to fill this partner information out with funding partners or partners on the project unless they are the ones applying for a grant. You'll scroll down, and this is the next kind of section you'll see. And this is just information on your project. So that project title will already be filled in for you, and then you'll want to write a brief project description. We do not score this section. However, we will use this description to give to our board if you are awarded funds. It is only 100 words or less, so a few sentences on the project scope is sufficient. I'll also use this during the screening process to determine that your project and components are eligible. The next section is the budget summary, pretty self-explanatory there, but do make sure the numbers you are putting on the summary page match what is presented in the budget. That includes how much you're requesting from GOCO, the total project cost, and your matching funds. Next, you'll fill out the county and city where the project is located. After you fill out that information, your narrative questions will also be on that page under all that information. Once you have all that filled out, this will be the next page that you see. And this is where you're going to upload all of the attachments. It might be hard to see on your screen, but the attachments are all listed below. We're going to go through all of these so you don't have to kind of look over those right now. I'll go over those in a minute. But this is where you're going to upload all of those attachments. Do make sure that it is a one single PDF, and it does have to be 25 megabytes or less. Keep that in mind when you are uploading your attachments. We do have sample templates and samples on our website of all of these attachments. And again, I'll go over that link on where you can find all that info. If you have attachments you would like to attach outside of the required attachments, you can do that. For example, surveys, documentation of public process, things like that. But again, keep in mind that there is that 25 megabyte limit. So what I recommend is not including full master plans. Those are probably not going to be able to be uploaded. But if you want to pull a page out of the master plan or attach a survey, things like that, you should be able to do that along with all of the required. So this is the resolution is the first thing listed on the required attachments. You will have to pass a resolution before you apply. Again, we do have a template on our website where you can just plug in your information. So you can download that and just use that version. If you'd like to create your own, that is okay. We do look for specific things in the resolution, however. We do ask support for the proposed project and its completion, recognition of the need to provide matching funds, maintenance capability of your project, the status of the property, if you own the property or you're leasing, reasonable public access to the project. This can look different for different projects. For example, the schoolyard initiative. We understand that schools might have to be closed during the day when school is in session, but we do require that the project be open to the public at certain times. So whether that's after school, on the weekends, in the summer, you can kind of determine how that access piece looks like, but just keep in mind that it is something that we do require. And then designate a specific person to sign that grant agreement. I always recommend to not designate a person's name, so Tom Jones, but instead designate a title, so mayor of city. So that way, if Tom Jones leaves, the next mayor who comes in can sign, or whoever that is for you. This resolution is for our LPOR mini plant or grants. The schoolyard, I believe, is pretty similar. It might look a little bit different for a sponsoring entity. Our planning resolutions obviously look a little bit different. There is no maintenance capability for a planning grant or status of property. So those do look a little bit different, but we still ask for support of the project, that recognition to complete or to provide matching funds, and that a designated person signs the grant agreement. If you pass a resolution with all of this language, you do not need to pass a new resolution for GOCO if you are awarded funds, and this will work for us. Your intergovernmental agreement, this is only necessary if you are sponsoring an application on an ineligible entity's behalf, or you are that ineligible entity. So if it's just the county, city, or special district applying, you do not need to submit this IGA. Again, we do have a template on our website that you can use, but the IGA should state that an ineligible entity is requesting funds from GOCO, and that ineligible entity, this IGA would bind that ineligible entity to GOCO's grant agreement. And that eligible entity does not assume any obligations in that grant agreement. This only has to be a draft when you apply. Schoolyard Initiative will always have an IGA, so make sure you are uploading a draft IGA when you apply for the Schoolyard Initiative grant. Our environmental checklist must be the GOCO version. Again, this is on our website that you can download. This can be filled out by someone on staff who is knowledgeable about the project or by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. The one time it does have to be filled out by CPW is if your project is within 200 feet of any aquatic landscape. If that is the case, I would reach out to CPW as soon as possible. We can provide contact information if needed. If you are upgrading amenities where amenities already exist, or there are already amenities in place at this park and you're just adding additional amenities, you would probably not have to call CPW since there's something already in place. You can just have someone on staff who's knowledgeable about the project fill this out. If it's a completely new property, a recent acquisition, it would be a good idea to have your district wildlife manager come out to check the project. If you are not sure, feel free to contact GOCO first, and we can point you in the right direction on who should fill this environmental checklist out. Make sure there are 2 signatures, so whoever fills out the checklist, whether that's CPW or someone on your staff, and the primary contact that you listed on that summary page. If the primary contact is the same person as the person who fills out this environmental checklist, you can just have someone else on staff look over the checklist and sign it as well. The next attachment we require is a timeline. You do have 2 years from the award date to complete your projects. So that's from March of 2019. The timeline attachment does not have to be sophisticated. We do have this sample Word document on our website, which you are more than welcome to use. Do make sure that the timeline you submit corresponds to what is in the narrative. The tasks on the left-hand side, again, can be created by you, and you will correlate that to your budget and your scope. Make sure that the dates, again, correlate to what you are writing in the narrative. Again, all of these attachments are for all of our programs, so LPOR, mini, planning, schoolyard. The planning will obviously not need that environmental checklist since there's nothing to check. The resolution will look a little bit different since there is no status of property or maintenance. But for planning, we still do need a resolution, the budget timeline, and then the rest of the things I'll talk about when we go through those questions. Great, so I'll go through the application questionnaire, our review process, our local park outdoor recreation and mini questions, our planning questions, and what we look for in those. So our applications are scored on a 100-point scale. You will see in a minute that each question, there are points corresponding to those questions. We do include this information in the portal, so you will know how many points each question is worth. When applications come in, we group them into region. For example, Denver Metro would be one region. We would probably have a couple of Eastern Plains groups, Western Slope. One question we do get is if your community is smaller but located in Denver Metro, for example, are we going to be competing with Denver? So we also try and group applications together based on size and similarity. Unfortunately, it is dependent on what comes in each cycle, but we do our best to match communities. We do group LPOR, mini, planning, and schoolyard separately. Also, just something to note is that each group contains about 10 applications per group once we group those into region. We solicit peer reviewers from around the state, so people like yourselves, park and rec directors, grant writers, architects, county commissioners. We then group reviewers into region, and we make sure reviewers are not reading applications from their same region. Again, these reviewers have about 2 months to read 10 applications, and we ask for comments and scores for each application. 2 GOCO staff members, myself included, will read every application that comes in. We will then have meetings to discuss each application and whether we would fund that project or not, what the application could do better if they resubmitted for next cycle, or what we liked about the project. If you would like to volunteer, we would love to have you as a peer reviewer. It's a great way to learn about GOCO's process and just see what the review process looks like from our end. Then once we kind of go through those meetings and we have our scores, these staff scores will average together to form a score. The peer reviewer scores will average together to form a peer review score. Then we average the staff score and the peer reviewer score to get a composite score. At this point, we put all of the projects into one list. Again, we'll put all LPOR projects together, all mini projects together, all planning, so they're not all in one. And then we go down the list and fund as many projects as possible with the funding we have available. So that's kind of how our review process works, and you'll see here in a minute how we kind of score each question. So the local park and outdoor recreation and mini grants do look the same. These are the questions that we ask, and when you do sign into the portal, there are prompts there, so you don't have to kind of make up what you think we're asking. We do have those questions in the portal once you sign in. But I'm just going to go through each question and talk about what we look for in that question and what makes an application competitive. So for question 1, your community, this is where you're going to want to describe your community and what makes your community unique. What are the recreational interests of your community? This is where we're going to ask about demographic information, population and income data. And we ask this so that reviewers have a good picture of your community when they are reading about your projects. These reviewers, again, are from around the state, and they may have never been to your specific area or neighborhood. So make sure you're giving a clear picture of someone who may have never been to your city or may have never been to the neighborhood that you're serving. We also compare population information when you're talking about users and public outreach. A question we often get is, are smaller communities penalized because we're going to have less users than a Denver Metro or a Colorado Springs? And that's really why we ask the first half of this your community question, because we're comparing that population and demographic information that you gave. So we're not penalizing a small community just because they're going to have less users than a large community. This question is also where you're going to want to talk about your users. So be as specific as possible here. What specific community groups and organizations, sports teams, nonprofits will use this site? We ask this because we want to see that there is apparent demand for the project, that your community members are asking for this project. So we do ask that you provide user numbers, and we ask that you be as specific as possible with who's demanding this project and who's really going to use this project. The scope is where you're going to want to talk about exactly what you're asking GOCO to fund. So what exists at the site currently? How did you determine the current amenities are no longer acceptable if you're updating amenities there? Also talk about what is currently at the site, even if maybe nothing exists at the site yet. This is also where you can include photos in your attachments. Include photos of those amenities that you're upgrading or the project site as it exists now. I recommend not using those photos to answer this question, but using them as a guide for reviewers. So you can say, talk about why you're updating this playground. It's 40 years old, it's outdated, we have some broken pieces, and then you can say, see photos in the attachment. Also for this question, we'll pull out the budget and we'll compare the scope to what you have already wrote in your budget. So being as specific as possible here, you've already broken down your budget into line items and tasks on what you're going to complete. So just use that in your narrative. Talk about those tasks a little bit in more detail in the scope. If, for example, you're putting in a playground, what specific components are going to be in that playground? Are you going to have swings, monkey bars, slides, things like that? So really expanding on those components and then why you're putting those in. This is also where you're going to describe consultations you've had and how you came about this plan, why you chose those specific elements. Really what we're looking here at with the consultants is that you're doing your research, that you've reached out to maybe other communities who have done a similar project. If you're putting in a splash pad in your community and you don't have one, you don't know what the maintenance looks like, you want to see what other communities have done that was successful, feel free to reach out to other communities that have done that and do your research on, what was successful, what worked well, what didn't work well. And we can help you connect with those communities as well. This is also where you'll determine your useful life. So again, reaching out to those vendors, useful life typically wouldn't be over 25 years. So this is how long the project can be sustained and how long you're able to maintain the project. And again, we're asking about this research, we're asking that you reach out to vendors, and we're asking why you're putting in these components, because we want to make sure that GOCO investments, that we're investing responsibly with public funds. The access question, we ask how users you listed in question 1, where they live in relation to this project. How are users accessing this site? Are they biking? Are they walking? Is there a train? Is there a car or a bus station close by? Is it by a school and kids are walking over because it's close to school? Is it by a library? So just what are other amenities close by and how are users going to access? If there are obstacles in reaching the site, how will you overcome them? We do ask how many people are within a 10-minute walk. We understand that this is different for different projects and different communities. So again, a question we get a lot is, we are a rural community. Maybe we only have 5 people or no people within a 10-minute walk. That's okay, but just discuss that. Say that you're a rural community and most users drive and that's just way of life. If that's the case, how many parking spots are at the site? Are you able to accommodate all of the users that you listed in question 1? So again, this can look different for different communities, but just explain why that looks different for your specific community. This is also where you're going to want to attach maps to the attachments. And these do not have to be sophisticated maps at all. They can just be Google Maps that you scanned over. So one map will want to see where you are in relation to the state, where you are on the map. And then we'll want a site-specific map on where your project site is located in your community. Next, we ask about need. And this is where you're going to want to talk about how users are compensating now for lack of a project and how this project is going to enhance recreational opportunities in your community. Are you building an amenity where none exists? If that's the case, how far are users driving to access similar amenities, or are they going without? Are they not using a playground because you don't have one in your area? If users are traveling outside of your community or going without, why is this a barrier for some people? If you are upgrading amenities, what are the issues with the current amenities? Are they unsafe, past their useful life? Maybe your population has grown to where the amenities that were in place can no longer accommodate the amount of people using it now. So this question we're asking is why now, why it's needed, and we really want to understand the urgency here as well. If there will be programming, you can talk about that here. How will you program this site? Maybe if you have an outdoor classroom that you're putting in, there's going to be environmental education involved. If maybe the school district will come and use it. If you're putting in a splash pad, maybe there are daycares that are going to come and use the site 3 days a week. So this is where you can talk about what that programming will look like and how you're able to expand that programming. One good example is if you're putting in a new sports field. What does programming look like now? Say it's a baseball field for your baseball teams. Will you be able to expand programming for that baseball team? Will you be able to offer more games? Will you be able to have practice, tournaments? Are you turning kids away now? So these are questions that you'll really want to dive into in this question. GOCO does try to fund the most urgent and needed projects around the state. So this is really where you're going to want to stress that urgency. So planning and outreach, this should take place before you apply. This is where you're going to want to discuss if you have any master plans where your project is listed as a priority. You can discuss that master plan. If you do not have one, that is okay. It's not necessary. You'll also talk about how this project became a priority. If it's in your master plan, what priority number is it in that master plan? Why are you tackling this project now? If it's not in a master plan, how did it become a priority for your community? Maybe it's youth who came up to community meetings and said they want an updated playground. Maybe it's parents and things like that that really spearheaded this project. So it's okay to not have a master plan, but we really want to know how this project came about. And then you'll talk about your public and planning and outreach process. So if you had meetings, how many meetings did you have and how are they advertised? What specific feedback did you hear? What did you learn from your community doing that outreach? GOCO investments are going towards what the community wants, and we do want to make sure that the users you listed will be using the project, and that those users are the ones demanding this project. Public outreach, again, does look different for different communities. Some do meetings. Sometimes meetings don't work for some communities, and that's okay. You can be creative. You can think outside the box. Do social media posts and get feedback from that. You can do surveys. You can go door to door and knock. You can go to the current amenities and interview people who are using the equipment now to provide feedback. Provide food at a community barbecue, or provide a translator for people who speak Spanish, for example. So different communities definitely have different approaches to public planning and outreach. And we hope to see, that outside the box, creative outreach when you're doing that, because we know that communities are different, and one outreach process is not going to be the same. If you have questions on what other communities have done in the past that worked well, if you want examples of surveys or outreach, we can definitely provide that for you. So opposition, you'll talk about if there was any opposition when you went through that public planning process. It is okay if there's opposition. We understand that we can't make everyone happy, and we totally understand that. So how will you overcome that opposition? Are you working with neighbors or community members to overcome that? If there is no opposition, even better. You can talk about how there was no opposition. Do make sure that you're answering this question still, even if there was no opposition. Maybe why was there no opposition? Was it because you worked with those neighbors who maybe didn't like a specific component that you had in mind, so you changed the design? So we just want to make sure that you did your public outreach and that you're working with people to change designs and learn and get that feedback. So the maintenance, this is where you're going to want to talk about the annual cost to maintain your project. Take an educated guess on this. Reach out to vendors. Again, reach out to different communities. If you are putting in a splash pad and you've never had one before, see what other communities are spending on maintenance per year. Or reach out to vendors and see what typically they would recommend you have each year for maintenance. So again, we just want to make sure that you're doing your research to determine that your community can maintain a project for the useful life that you determined. You'll also talk about who will provide the maintenance and what will maintenance consist of. The youth involvement, so there's two ways to get full points on this question. One is if you hire Colorado Youth Corps Association. There are 9 accredited youth corps throughout the state, and you can hire a youth corps to come in and work on your project. Another way is, and I would actually recommend this way, is involving local youth in your projects. This can look, again, different for different communities. So if you have Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts in your community, 4-H or FFA, Boys and Girls Clubs, your local school, getting them involved any way that you can. Involvement also can look different. So maybe you have volunteer days where you can clean up the site, or maybe you have days where the kids can go out and plant some trees for the landscaping. We understand that not all projects you can have kids out there on site. So if that's the case, have them involved in different ways. Maybe that's being involved in that design process. Maybe it's having them pick out components on what they want to see in their parks. Maybe it's fundraising. So again, you can be creative on how you want to involve youth in your projects, but I would recommend reaching out to local youth and getting them involved any way that you can. So your match status, this is where you're going to discuss partnerships involved in that project. You'll talk about if you have your full match secured, and if not, you'll provide a plan B if full match is not secured. If you have that full match secured, no need to provide a plan B. But if you are, waiting on a health foundation grant, we'll ask what would happen if that grant falls through. How are you going to make up those matching funds? Whether it's you're going to continue fundraising or you're going to make it up with your city budget, things like that. So the funding need, this is where you'll talk about specifically funding. So it's a little bit different from the other need question. What will be lost if this project is not undertaken now? You're going to focus on why you need GOCO funds to complete this project and what will happen if GOCO funds fall through. Maybe you have a matching grant and you only have 2 years to use that grant money. So if you don't get a GOCO grant now, you won't have matching funds in the future. Will the matching funds that the city put up be lost because they have to be diverted to another project? So focus on the financial need here. And then timeline, we do ask about a narrative here, even though you attach that timeline as well. So do make sure you're answering this question. You're going to want to talk about if you have any design, engineering, or permitting outstanding. If so, when will that be completed? We are trying to fund the most shovel-ready and urgent projects. So we recommend most of that design and engineering be completed when you apply. Some can be outstanding, and that's totally fine, but we recommend that most of it kind of be nailed down. And again, you do have 2 years from March of 2019 to complete your project. And then the letters of support are the only question where you will not have to provide any narrative. So this is where you're going to attach 7 letters of support to your attachments. Make sure it's 7, no more, no less. These letters should be unique. Make sure they're not form letters. And typically these should come from the users that you listed in question 1 under your community. They can come from neighbors, anyone involved in that public planning process. If your project is youth focused, getting letters from youth is always a great idea. So make sure you're getting unique, different letters and that they are not form letters. We'll move on to the planning. So again, our planning grants are for master plans for park and rec departments, site-specific plans, master plans, regional trail plans, plans for river corridor and open space. Components that can count towards our planning are consultants, professional services such as legal, facilitation, professional planning, any costs that are directly related to a planning activity, such as inventory, design, GIS mapping, printing, and public engagement. And that public engagement can include focus groups, surveys, web-based outreach. So the first question here, our planning grants are only 4 questions, and they are all 25 points each. So the plan type, this is where you're going to want to talk about what kind of plan you are proposing, whether that's a site-specific plan, a master plan, a trails plan, and then why you're proposing that. We want to know what the recreational gaps are in your community. You'll also want to give an overview of your community. So just like I talked about in the LPOR and mini application, give a background to your community. Again, these reviewers may never have been to your city or county. So what makes your area unique? I would recommend putting in some demographic information here as well. Then you're going to want to describe the vision and goals of this plan, and then those desired outcomes. The plan should present a clear solution to filling those recreational gaps that you discussed. We'll also look at maps here, so make sure you're attaching maps, at least a map of where you are in the state. If you have a site-specific plan, for example, you can include a map of that specific site area that you're planning, but at least a map of where you are located. The planning process, this is where you're going to want to dive into specific steps you will take to complete the planning process. You're going to want to present a clear process for development of the proposed plan that you discussed in number 1. So this can look like step 1, reviewing inventory. Step 2, creating an RFP and hiring a consultant. Step 3, stakeholder engagement. Step 4, public engagement. You'll also want to talk about the deliverables after all of those steps. So deliverables could be things like we'll have priority projects once we do our public planning or public outreach. We'll have our trail alignment once we hire a consultant. We'll have GIS maps or construction documents. Maybe it's a draft plan. So those are the things we're looking for in that planning process. For the public engagement, make sure you are being as specific as possible here. We do understand that it is a planning grant and you might not know exactly what your public planning process is going to look like, but give some examples of what you might do, whether that's surveys, whether that's community meetings. Maybe you want to have 5 community meetings over the course of 2 years. Maybe you just want 3. But give some examples of how you're going to reach out to the public and what that public engagement is going to look like. The needs and challenges. We're looking for an apparent and urgent need for GOCO funds here. The scope of the project, your project, would be significantly reduced if GOCO funds were not given. So we're looking for specific information on individuals, groups, schools, stakeholders that are going to be engaged in the public planning process, and then how those stakeholders are going to be engaged. This is also where you're going to want to document any community support for the plan. So also attaching 7 letters of support, probably from those stakeholders that you listed. This is also, we understand that because you're coming to GOCO, there is a strong financial need, but also talking about needs outside of finances. So maybe it's you're hiring an outside consultant because you don't have anyone on staff with the ability to create construction documents. Maybe there's no one who can do those GIS maps. Maybe you're having trouble reaching out to your constituents and your community. So you'd like a public plan to do that. So that's what we're talking about here for needs and challenges. So it's financial and those non-financial needs. And then the implementation is how you'll make this plan. How is this plan going to be implemented in the future? What impact will this plan have on your community that you discussed in question 1, on those stakeholders that you discussed in question 3? How are those stakeholders going to help implement this plan once it's completed? We want to make sure that this plan is consistent with GOCO's mission. So we asked that in this question as well. And then also, how are you going to fund these construction projects once the plan is in place? So maybe you are coming back for GOCO construction funds. Maybe you're applying for the Connect initiative after your trail is complete. We also want to see how you're going to leverage those funds with outside funders as well. So whether that is applying for different grants, whether that's your city budget. So it can be different again for different communities, but do make sure that you're discussing funding here as well. And then next we have our schoolyard initiative. Let's see if Erica's on here. Erica, are you joining us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry, everybody, that I keep repeating myself. Thanks for letting me know you can hear me. So the Schoolyard Initiative is exactly what it sounds like. It's a grant program meant to transform aged, outdated, or as Madison mentioned, the grant is up to $110,000, and you can use $10,000 of that for a professional design consultant, but it's not required. The Schoolyard Initiative is meant for all schools, elementary, middle, or high school. However, we do see most applicants from elementary schools. But that's not to say we wouldn't accept applications for middle or high schools. The most successful applicants have an authentic youth process and a really great community engagement, as well as their school playground provides opportunities for playing and for learning. We see really great applications from schools that can tie outdoor learning to their curriculum and other programs offered at the school, whether that's an after-school club or a during-school club, things like that. And most successful applicants not only activate the schoolyard with curriculum and other learning opportunities, but they also use the outdoor spaces. So for example, like gardens are really great opportunities to do that. And then one of the other great things about this program is that there's we also have a partnership with CPW called SOUL, which stands for Schools and Outdoor Learning Environments. And the SOUL program is designed to increase interest and participation in the outdoors by connecting students and families to environmental education programs and outdoor locations. This is completely free for schools to participate in, but it's not a requirement. In this program, they'll work with 4th grade teachers. If you are a middle or high school and you're interested in this program, they can also try to be as flexible as
possible with their offerings to accommodate you. But they normally work with fourth grade teachers, and they bring 3 program providers into schools to do some sort of learning and activity with kids. So for example, Butterfly Pavilion or Hot Quest or the Museum of Nature and Science or other partners like that that might be closer to you regionally if you're not in the metro area. And in addition to those 3 in-school programming opportunities, they also provide 3 out-of-school programming opportunities. And those would be 3 field trips. One is to one of the program providers. One is to a History Colorado or History Colorado affiliate, and the other is to a state park. They take care of transportation and everything. So it's a really great opportunity for schools and teachers to just continue the learning experience that's happening outside. And lastly, like I said, it's free to participate, but it's not required. As we mentioned, $10,000 of the grant funding can be used for design services. This is because we do require conceptual design with the application. It's a 2-year timeline, as Madison mentioned, for other grant programs, and we want to make sure that we're funding shovel-ready projects. You don't have to use that full $10,000. You can use half of it or none of it if you need to. All right, next we'll get into the Schoolyard Initiative grant questions. Some of these are really similar to the ones that Madison talked about, so I won't spend as much time on those, but I'll dive deeper into the ones that I think are the most important and the ones that make applicants stand out. So the first question is about your community. So tell us about your school and the surrounding community and neighborhood. Again, what makes it unique? How many students attend? We're also looking for demographic information here, as well as free and reduced lunch rate information. The Schoolyard Initiative doesn't have a requirement for free and reduced lunch rate. I know some other grant programs do. We do not. However, we typically fund schools with 40-45% free and reduced lunch rate or higher. That's not to say if your free and reduced lunch rate is less that you wouldn't have a chance of funding. You certainly would. You would have to definitely make the case for the need for a new playground in the third question, which we'll just talk about in a second. Access, similar to what Madison talked about, is it easy? Is it safe to get to the school and the playground? Typically, because these are in neighborhoods, they are easily accessed, but we just want to make sure that there's no barriers to getting to the playground. And in addition, I just want to reiterate that the playground will be required to have public access. So that would be after school, on the weekends, and during breaks. The third question is about need. Why do you need a new playground? Is the equipment old? Is it outdated? Is it unsafe? Have you had to remove pieces because they weren't safe anymore? You couldn't replace them? Things like that. Also, has your student body, maybe doubled in size, or have you added more students or another grade level that you weren't anticipating, and you need more equipment to accommodate more students? Do you need a place for taking learning outdoors? Do you need an outdoor classroom? Do you need ADA access or ADA accessible equipment? So things like that for this question. The next 2 questions are the most important questions, youth and community engagement. Youth and community engagement are 2 of the most important questions. We're looking for projects where students were given decision-making power and not merely asked to vote on playground options that they like best. Oftentimes, or in the past, we had seen, students presented with maybe 2 to 3 options of what the playground could look like. And that is fine as long as it's after they've been engaged on what they want to see on their playground. We don't want them just voting, but we really want them involved in what they see on their new playground because they're the users of this playground. Also in this question, we're looking for, things like how can the new playground provide a space for community members as well? in one of our past projects that we funded, there was a retirement home across the street from the school. And students went and visited residents at the retirement home and asked them what they would like to see. You know, they told them about the project they were doing, and they wanted to know if they had any additional input. The residents had mentioned to the students that they're really just looking for a walking trail and maybe some gardens that they could plant in. And what was really great is that the students took those two suggestions and included it in their proposal. So we're really looking for ways that not just the youth can use this outdoor space, but residents and community members as well. And so those are really great examples of, you know, successful ideas on what to do for those two questions. For project scope, be as specific as possible when you're answering this question. How many swings? What kind of structures? How many boulders? Things like that. And make sure that they all tie to the budget. So everything that you're listing in this question is also listed in your budget. And we want to see things in the scope that the youth and community are asking for that they're included. Sometimes we see a youth and community engagement process, and then the project scope doesn't include those opinions and wants of the youth and the community members. So just be sure to include that in the scope and that we can make that clear connection. Ongoing use. This is probably the next most important question. What we're really looking for here is how the playground is going to be used during school hours and then after school hours. So in what ways can teachers take learning outdoors, or in what ways will they be able to take learning outdoors? And then for after school hours, we're really looking for how will you welcome the community and neighbors to the playground once it's built. GOCO doesn't see these investments in school playgrounds as just benefits for students. We also see it as a community and neighborhood park. And we want to make sure that they're able to use it. So some things that we've seen people do is they've hosted their back to school night outside, or they did a ribbon cutting ceremony when the playground was officially completed, and they invited community members and residents to see the new playground. So those are just some examples here of ongoing use and kind of what we're looking for there. Letters of support. For the schoolyard initiative, you can include 10 letters of support, like Madison said, no more, or no less than 10. What we're really looking here is for, you know, all potential user groups to provide a letter of support. So we're looking for letters of support from parents, from teachers, from residents, from students, etc. And again, no form letters here. And we really, and same with like signatures, having kind of a generic letter of support and then getting people to sign it. We're really more interested in seeing individual letters. The next question is about financials. So talking about the need for GOCO funding, as well as what you'll do if GOCO funding is not secured. And then in this question, we're also looking to see how much match you have secured at the time of the application. Like our other grant programs, not the full matching amount is not required at the time of the application, but we do like to see a majority of matching funds in hand. Again, so we're funding shovel-ready projects that will be able to be completed in that 2-year timeline. And then lastly, maintenance. So GOCO can't fund maintenance, so how will the school or the school district maintain the property? And being as specific as possible here as well, and not just saying we will maintain the property, but allocating a certain amount from your budget to maintain the property is what we're looking for there. So we'll talk about the steps to apply next. The first step is to really discuss the project with school leadership and or your district to make sure that they're fully bought in to the project and support the project. Sometimes this can also lead to getting matching funds from either the school or the district. So it's great to discuss it with them first and to include them in the process as you move forward. Next, we'll ask you to contact GOCO staff, so please contact me just so we can talk through your project and hear a little bit more about what you're thinking, why you need the playground, see if there's any ideas or ways that we can help you be more successful. And then we also just want to make sure that it's worth your time. Like Madison mentioned, all of our grant programs are extremely competitive, and so we want to make sure that we're as upfront and honest about if we think like funding would be likely awarded or not. The next step would be to contact your local government. Schools are ineligible entities to receive GOCO funding, so you'll have to partner with your local government, so your town, city, or county to sponsor your application. And we can provide contact information for usually for any of the local governments that you might need. So please reach out to us if you're not sure who to contact. And then next, I would say start securing your matching funds. Can the PTA contribute? Are you going to do a school-wide fundraiser? Can you look for smaller grants that you can use as matching funds? We realize that especially in some of the schools that have high free and reduced lunch rates, that matching funds can take some time to secure. So just really being cognizant of that and trying to start that as soon as possible. And also I would say that if matching funds are ever a barrier, we don't want them to be a barrier to why a school doesn't apply. So please reach out to us so we can talk through that if you're experiencing any financial hardship. And then I'd say it's a great time to start the application. So it's a 10-question application. It's not terribly a long application. The things that take the most time are that youth and community engagement piece, as well as the fundraising. We also have a how to apply guide on our website that is kind of the 10 steps kind of laid out in which order to start. That has hyperlinks, and I think is a really great resource. So if you are interested in this grant program, I would definitely encourage you to visit our website and download that 10-step guide. It can be extremely helpful. In addition, we also have successful applications on our website. So we have 2 elementary schools on there currently and 1 middle school. They all have great youth and community engagement. They have great project scopes. So it could give you some idea of kind of what we're looking for in our successful application.
Great, thank you, Erica. So our GOCO online portal, I talked a little bit about that, but just keep in mind that I would recommend signing up for that portal login as soon as possible. So getting your username and password, and if you already have a username and password, making sure that you can still sign in. If you forgot your password for some reason, which I totally do all the time, feel free to email us and we can get that for you. We do have all the portal instructions online, so you can download those instructions and use that as a step-by-step guide when you are applying. Do contact us if there are any issues. If there are any technical issues, we have someone who can help with that. And then do try and sign up for that portal as soon as possible and submit as soon as possible. Another thing to keep in mind is that each question now does have a character limit on there. So it does correspond with the points provided, as I discussed earlier. And the character limits are also on that portal. They are shown to you. So keep that in mind when you are applying. And then I'll just chat about some additional funding opportunities that we have. This might be a little bit hard to see, but this is our 2018-2019 grant calendar. And we do have this on our website. And I can definitely send this to you if you're interested in any of our other programs or just having that for yourself. So our open space grants. These grants help fund land conservation projects for public and private use through fee acquisitions or conservation easements. Some examples of these are buffering in holdings, community separators, agricultural lands. So we found ranches that are still working, scenic views, We fund urban open space, which has trails on the property. So these are typically for low capacity land acquisitions. We also do have land acquisition through our local park and outdoor recreation grant. Our local government land acquisitions are for acquisitions of properties to be used in the future for development of parks. So if you have a high capacity development acquisition that you're looking for, you can feel free to reach out to us, and I can discuss our land acquisition, our local government land acquisition opportunity with you. In partnership with Colorado Youth Court Association, GOCO offers $500,000 in funding each year to local governments to hire youth conservation corps. CYCA is a statewide coalition of 9 accredited youth corps. They are throughout the state. So they hire youth and veterans ages 16 to 25 to complete a variety of projects. These include trail construction and maintenance, wildlife habitat improvement, invasive species removal, fire fuels mitigation. This program is a little bit different, so funds would not be awarded directly. However, if you get funded, a youth corps would come complete the project you have at no cost of the municipality. Matching funds are not required for this program either. The only requirements are for the sponsor is to provide camping space if needed, any specialty equipment, environmental education, and a pre-project walkthrough. Crews are trained in this work. They do bring their own equipment, and they have a project lead on site. Our habitat restoration grants help improve and restore rivers, streams, wetlands, and critical habitat. Projects must take place on conserved property, but any local government can apply to this program as well. And then I'll just chat about our 3 big initiatives. Our PROTECT initiative funds urgent and once-in-a-lifetime land conservation projects. These projects range from urban parcels to ranch lands that encompass tens of thousands of acres. But the biggest thing about this project is that they present a compelling and urgent need and involve significant size or cost. Unfortunately, we are no longer offering this program. However, our next strategic plan is in 2020, and we're hoping to offer all of these initiatives again in some form. This might look different, but hopefully we'll have funds available for this in the future. Our Connect initiative is our large-scale trail funding grant. Excuse me. So this is for to increase access to the outdoors for communities by filling trail gaps, building new trails, and providing better walkable and bikeable access for youth and families in your community. You can request up to $2 million for these trail construction projects. There is no stipulations on trail surfacing, so they can be hard surface or soft surface. Typically, they are larger scale and higher cost. If you are interested in this program, we will have our applications out next year. Chris Yuan Farrell, again, his information will be at the end. He is running that program. So if you have a trail in mind, I would recommend reaching out to him as soon as possible. And then our Inspire initiative, this is the cornerstone of our strategic plan. GOCO created this Inspire initiative to encourage youth and their families to get outside. So 3 kind of things are wrapped around in this Inspire initiative. One is places for kids and their families to get out and play and connect with the outdoors. The second is programs that activate those spaces. And the third is pathways to the outdoors for stewardship and leadership roles. Again, unfortunately, we do not have funding available for that program. But out of that program, we launched what is called Generation Wild. I'm going to have Rosemary talk about that program here just for a minute.
Hi, I'm Rosemary Dempsey, Director of Communications at GOCO. Nice to meet you. Generation Wild is a sibling program to our Inspire initiative because it shares the same goal as Inspire of getting Colorado kids and their families outdoors more often. So this is a statewide integrated marketing and communications program where we're using a variety of mass media, including television advertising, digital advertising, social media, and a wide range of other tactics, and leveraging a vast network of partners to spread the word about why it's important to get kids outdoors these days. It's been an exciting program that launched in May of 2017. So we've just been in the midst of our second major campaign season this summer, and we'll be continuing it through this fall and winter months and hopefully much more beyond that. There are plenty of ways for organizations like yours to join the Generation Wild movement. Hopefully, some of you have already received an invitation to request swag from Generation Wild. You can also certainly follow up Generation Wild Colorado on Facebook and Instagram. And we actually just recently launched a new Facebook group that's got tremendous early traction. It's called Raising Generation Wild. So if you search for that name, Raising Generation Wild in Facebook, you can ask to join our group where parents, grandparents, caregivers of children, and people working in the outdoor programs that invite youth and their families to join are all sharing tips and inspiration for getting kids outside, sharing information about their programs and events, and also talking about interesting articles and trending topics related to the youth and nature movement. So I highly recommend you join that. We also send out a periodic partner e-newsletter that's monthly during the summer season and then goes a little bit more intermittent after that. If you'd like to join the Generation Wild partner e-newsletter list so that you can stay in the loop on future partner opportunities through the campaign, you can just shoot me an email at rdempsey@goco.org and I'll get you added to that list. There's always new and exciting marketing and communication tactics and partner opportunities rolling out. We also have lots of printed copies of our popular 100 Things to Do Before You're 12 list. You can see that at www.generationwild.com/the-list, just to see it as an example. But you can also email me and ask for printed copies of that list, so feel free to do that. We also go to partner events with our Generation Wild booth regularly and are always looking for our partners to propose new ways for us to partner with them on the Generation Wild front. So if you've got your own ideas, you can email me at rdempsey@goco.org. I'd love to hear what you think of the campaign and any ideas you have.
Thanks so much, Rosemary. Awesome. Just a few more tips before I let you all go. So contact GOCO staff first. Again, we can help you be as competitive as possible with your application. We can recommend what components to come in for, and we can really guide your project. So definitely reach out to us. We do offer sample applications. So if you would like to see a sample application of a similar project, or a community of your size, anyone that might have done the public planning and outreach process really well, we can definitely send those along to you. Do submit a draft for pre-review. Again, for me, that would be October 18th. For Erica, I believe that is December 11th. So send those along to us and we can give you feedback. Keep in mind the process is really competitive. And if you are not successful, you can reapply. And if you are not successful the first time, we will offer score sheets. We can set up feedback meetings with you, and we can help you be more competitive for next time. This is where you're going to find all of the links. So if you type in goco.org/grants, this is where you're going to find the local park and outdoor recreation and the schoolyard links. Make sure you are clicking on the specific link to get to the specific portal. And this applicant resource page is where you can find the schoolyard webinar. We'll put this recorded webinar on there. This is also where you can find successful samples. If you don't see a sample on there that you would like, we can send you different ones. And you'll find a sample budget form on there as well. Some things not to do. Remember to respond to every single question that we're asking, and make sure you're not referring to attachments to answer those questions. For example, that timeline question, make sure you're still providing narrative there. Don't send letters of support to GOCO office. We love to see them, but then we cannot share those letters of support with reviewers. So make sure when you ask people for support letters, they're sending them to you. Emails are fine as well. Make sure you're listing one primary contact, just so I have a point person, and Erica has a point person to contact if we need additional information. And then again, make sure you don't wait for the last minute to create that portal login, just so everyone is less stressed. And that way we can help you as best we can, and we can make sure that you reach the deadline. This is all of our contact information. Again, Christian Farrell, if you're interested in habitat restoration or connect, feel free to reach out to him. Matt Brady will be your point person once you're awarded a grant. And then I'm your point person for local park outdoor recreation, mini and planning, and Erica for the schoolyard. I'll stay on and answer a couple of questions if people want to type in that chat function. I am going to still keep people muted just so we don't have people talking over each other. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to sign off or shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm happy to answer questions one-off as well. So the first question I have here is, does a 501c3 working with a county sign an IGA or MOU since one is not governmental? So yes, so the partner, that nonprofit, the school district, the unincorporated county will sign the MOU or IGA, and that eligible entity, so the county, the city, or the park and rec district will also sign. So make sure you have spots for those two entities to sign the IGA or MOU. Let's see. Can the planning grant process be used to apply for funding and economic feasibility analysis? Yes, we've actually funded several economic feasibility studies in the past. What I do recommend is definitely tying that to recreation. So for one example, I believe it was Town of Parachute. They came in for a planning grant. They, have issues with a lot of the energy out there shutting down. So they're looking for ways to kind of incorporate recreation into their economy. So that was kind of a feasibility study that they were doing, and we can definitely fund those, and we have in the past. I'd be happy to provide samples of those. But again, make sure it's tied to recreation somehow. Will a recording of this webinar be available for later review? Yeah, we are definitely going to put this on our website, and then we can shoot this out in an email. If you request it, feel free to shoot me an email and I can send this along to you. Our total project includes an amphitheater and trails component. Knowing that GOCO does not fund amphitheater, would the project budget need to be pared down to just the trails portion, or the GOCO percentage of the project total go against the whole total, including the amphitheater? So you would not include that amphitheater in the budget. I would take that out and then just pare it down so that it is just that trails component and any other eligible components. So anything that is ineligible for GOCO funding, we couldn't use that as match either. So we would have to take that out of the budget. I'll stay on if there's any more questions, but feel free to sign off. I don't see any right now. Feel free to ask in the chat function if you have any. Will applying for more than one GOCO grant work for or against us? So if, for example, you're applying for an LPOR grant and you're sponsoring an ineligible entity in a mini grant, you would not be competing against one another. The reviewers for the mini program wouldn't know that you also applied for LPOR. If you're applying for two LPOR grants, the way we group those applications, you would be competing against yourself. So you can come in for LPOR, sponsor an LPOR. I think the city of Colorado Springs did that, and we funded both of those projects. We funded a school project that they sponsored, and we also funded a city project that they came in for. But just keep in mind that you would be kind of diluting the pool a little bit and competing against each other. So depending on kind of what program you're applying for, you can definitely come in for more than one. But just keep that in mind. If you're applying in the same program, you would be competing against yourself. Applying as a school district for the schoolyard grant, the summary form applicant will be the sponsor. Is that all we are using the eligible applicant for? Do we end? You will. The eligible applicant will need to pass a resolution before you apply as well. So they will have to state support for the process, and you'll have to submit that IGA. Other than that, the ineligible entity can write the grant, can log into the portal. We'll just need their information and then that resolution. Do we need to mention them anywhere else within the application? You do not. So if they are not contributing any funding, that's totally okay. We understand that budgets are tight. So if the school district is applying for a schoolyard, that eligible entity does not have to be discussed in the application. If they are involved in any way, maybe they're going to use that school site for camps in the summer and things like that. Then you can definitely mention them as a partner who would be using that site, but they don't have to contribute funds or things like that. And then to what extent do we use them other than sponsorship and summary form? That's typically up to them. So I would contact your local government as soon as possible, reach out to them and see how they want to be involved in the project. Again, sometimes they can't contribute any funds, but maybe they can do some in-kind and donate material. Maybe they have equipment that you can use. So I would definitely reach out to them as soon as possible and see how they can involve. And it is project by project is pretty different. So for the schoolyard grant, can we apply for playground equipment? There was a small mention of trails that start and stop with inland. Could that work as well? Yep, definitely for the schoolyard. This, again, is only for schools. So if it's going to be on a school campus, you can definitely come in for playground equipment. And this can look like traditional playground equipment. It can be, outdoor classroom. It can be kind of whatever those students are looking for. So definitely the schoolyard, playground, and the trail that starts and stops within the same property that's eligible for the schoolyard. Can you apply for additional GOCO funding if you still have an open active GOCO grant for a project that has not been completed yet? So we have several entities that come in, even if they have an open grant. Definitely call us first. It is typically a case-by-case basis. But typically what we say is if you have maybe 1 or 2 open grants, that's okay. If you have like 5, we would recommend you not coming in for another. We really just want to make sure that, the projects we've already funded can get done in the time allotted. And we're not, we know that your staff is stretched thin. We don't want to stretch you thin even further. So call us before you apply for another one if you do have any open grants. Could you review your federal lands policy? From what I understand, we need an IGA between the sponsoring entity and the non-eligible entity. We would also need an MOU with the non-eligible entity or sponsoring entity with the federal land agency. So our federal land policy has changed a little bit. Typically, we were not able to fund any projects on federal lands. We have changed that. So now we are able to fund projects. Typically, these are like trail projects, trails that might go through BLM. To be honest, we haven't had an instance of doing a local government project like a playground or things like that on federal lands. It would still have to be that eligible entity that applies. So city, county, town. the federal agency is not eligible. So you would have to have a lease agreement with that federal entity, or an MOU or something like that with them. If you are a nonprofit that's applying through the county on federal lands, you would have to have probably those 3 separate MOUs. Again, that's something we haven't done in the past. So I believe Stacy answered this question. If you want to reach out to me, I can provide you with examples of maybe federal land MOUs. We haven't had that instance before, so it would be different for us, but we can definitely make it work. So this is a little bit one-off. So feel free to give me a call and I can walk you through that process. Again, those IGAs and MOUs are not necessary when you apply. They only have to be a draft. So you do have time to get that all squared away if you still want to apply in November. So for the schoolyard grant, match information, if we have applied to another similar grant not related to GOCO, could that be part of the match if it matches the overall project scope? Will that work against us? No, we actually recommend you leverage GOCO funds with other grant funders, with other funding opportunities. The construction cannot have started already. So if you are already in the process of constructing that project, unfortunately, we couldn't count that towards match. But if you haven't started, or if it's design and engineering, say you applied for a health foundation and the project hasn't started yet, and those components align with GOCO, definitely use that as match, and we would encourage you to do so. I'll stay on the line for any more questions. I don't see any right now, but I'll stick around in case anyone has more. But again, feel free to reach out to Erica or myself with any specific questions.
Because
Thank you everyone so much for joining us. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. I'll still stay on the line, but thank you. We really appreciate you tuning in and sticking with us for 2 hours. So thank you very much.